Mr. Aries, how you doing? What's going on in your life currently, man?
Good, man. I'm good. Don't call me Mr. Aries this whole interview. I'm gonna feel old and dated. So
What just happened?
Wrestle Magic Pod, official sponsors of British Empire Wrestling.
All right, everyone. Tonight's episode of Wrestle Magic. I know it looks like I'm sitting next to a campfire or something, going to tell you some scary stories. I promise that's not what I'm here doing. So, as we began recording the first time, power went out randomly. So, I'm doing the best that I can with this for you guys. Doing a mobile hotspot, have my phone's flashlight on me, but hey, we make do. But tonight's episode of Wrestle Magic, we have a very special guest, somebody who I feel is a TNA mainstay that I believe he is on the Mount Rushmore of TNA stars that really made it special at the time. And if I'm going to name them off, it's going to be AJ Styles, Abyss, Samoa Joe, and then this man here, Mr. Austin Aries. So, Mr. Aries, how are you doing, and what's going on in your life currently?
I'm doing good, man. I got all my power here in my place. It's not. I got my laptop's plugged in. Things are good, man. It's crazy. Really think about technology, right? Like we're talking, we're all coming from different parts of the world right now. And, technology is crazy that we're even able to do this. So these things happen and it's all good. I'm doing well. And I must thank you for including me in that Mount Rushmore. Those are some heavy hitter names you put up there. I would have also added, for me personally, Jeff Jarrett has to probably be up there, just because he's the guy who started the whole thing. But to be included in those gentlemen's company is much appreciated. And I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And well, tonight I've got my main co-host back. So King Scully, how you doing, man? What's going on in your life?
I'm very well. Thank you for asking, Maverick.
Of course. Not like we ran through this before already. But anyways, so Austin Aries, sir. So we always kind of like to ask around the beginning of your life. So what was your childhood like, and when did you decide to get into wrestling?
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in the Midwest, just outside of Milwaukee. Early in my life, I was actually into military stuff. My grandfathers both served. My uncles served. So I had a lot of the old, my grandfather's old memorabilia from World War II and dummy grenades. And hey, we got
Power's back.
We got light. Hey. And so I was really big into like G.I. Joe toys as a kid, right? Ages like 3, 4, 5. And then I saw wrestling one Saturday morning, and it was the AWA, which was out of Minneapolis. And it just really captivated me. I think something about the theatrics, but also the sport of it. It was being presented as a sport. And I was big into sports and, grew up an athlete. So once I saw that, all the G.I. Joe toys went away and they got replaced with the wrestling figures, mostly the old AWA Remco ones from the mid 80s. And that's what I spent a lot of my childhood doing, was crafting cards and wrestling with these action figures. The idea of becoming a wrestler never really dawned on me, right? I would have never even thought or known how to get into it. It was a very protected business. We didn't have Google to just look something up. And so, I grew up playing sports. I was a baseball player, football, amateur wrestling. Went to college for baseball. Got my fake ID my first day on campus. That kind of derailed my baseball career. I did win Bar Olympics though my freshman year, and was a hell of a beer league softball player. But after a couple of years, I realized college really wasn't my thing, and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And by chance, one of my childhood friends called me up and told me he was trained to be a pro wrestler in Minneapolis, which was a couple hours from where I was going to school. And I had to see it for myself. So I drove up there and saw this little ring set up in this garage, and guys were in there training. And I knew at that moment, I was like, man, this is what I want to do with my life.
Okay. Sounds like a fair startup and everything. So one thing I do want to ask for the second time now is, do you still have any of those old toys that you had as a kid, or, have you passed them on or anything like that?
Yeah, I wish I still had the G.I. Joe toys because they're probably worth some money. Those, I don't know what happened to those, but the wrestlers were in a box. They got handed down to my nephews, and I'm sure they're probably sitting in a box somewhere in storage. They're a little older now, but I gave them to them when they were younger. But they're probably sitting in my sister's or my mom's house somewhere in storage. Yeah.
Nice. And I'm glad to see that you were able to pass them on to somebody who would appreciate them as well. But all right, so Scully, what do you got for us, man?
So, Austin, who was your inspiration in wrestling? So who did you look up to, and who were your favorite wrestlers to watch?
So growing up, I grew up watching the Horsemen, so obviously, I loved the Four Horsemen. Roddy Piper, Bobby Heenan was one of my favorite personalities in all of wrestling. Loved Bobby Heenan. So during that era, that's kind of the guys that I really enjoyed watching. And then when I got into the industry, it shifted a little bit, and I started really appreciating guys like the Eddie Guerreros and the Chris Jerichos, the Chris Benoits, the junior heavyweights, the guys that were closer to my stature, that were closer to my style that I was trying to emulate. And so I think that if you kind of watch my style, you might see a little bit of all those influences. The kind of, I definitely have taken a little bits of the Horsemen in some things. And then there's definitely that influence of those junior heavyweight guys that I mentioned.
Okay, that's cool. And with regards to training, how quick did you pick it up?
Well, I didn't know at the time, but I was told a story many years later from one of the other veterans that was at the camp, and he said that we were training, and a local promoter came and was checking out the class and some of the new faces, and he said to Darren, he said, "Hey," he's like, "I see some new faces in here." He said, "That guy looks really good. How long's he been training?" And Darren was like, like 2.5 hours. And he's like, no, I don't mean today. How long's he been training? And Darren looks at me and goes, 2.5 hours. I think that because I watched so much wrestling and I was naturally an athlete, I picked up things very quick because it already made sense to me in some way. But with that being said, I was training, 3-4 hours a night, 3 times a week. And I trained for 6 months before I had my first match. And I could have had it sooner, but I kept pushing it back because I wanted to feel real confident when I walked out there the first time. I wanted to turn some heads. I wanted to make a statement. So I kept pushing it back. They're like, "Oh, you have your first match." I'm like, no, just give me a few more weeks. I really wanted to walk out. Because listen, in the entertainment industry and pro wrestling, confidence is everything. And if you don't walk out on stage, you don't walk out of the curtain with confidence, the people know it. And so I did wait 6 months before I had my first match. Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's valid. I mean, waiting 6 months, make sure that you're completely prepared and you're completely ready. Makes total sense. So who's your main trainer when you started going into wrestling school and everything?
Yeah, so the name that people would recognize is Eddie Sharkey. He was the trainer of champions. He trained the Road Warriors and Rick Rude and X-Pac and a lot of the guys that came out of the Minnesota area, Barry Darso. But by the time I started training, Eddie was a little up there in age. So he didn't do a lot of the in-ring stuff. The in-ring stuff was handled by a guy named Terry Fox. And Terry Fox was like an old AWA stagehand and kind of did a little jack of all trades and really gave. And I look back now and realize how lucky I was that I really got an old school mentality of training. I was really taught the basics, fundamentals. We were in a garage. We couldn't jump off the ropes. We couldn't do flips or dives or hurricanranas or it was I learned the same 15 things over and over and over and over and over again for 6 months until all those things were mastered and they were muscle memory. And, when I ended up becoming a trainer or when I do seminars, I really preach that Like that first part when you're installing your foundation is the most important part. And the problem is, when we start, we're excited. We want to start running before we've learned to walk. We want to do all the cool stuff. And that's why, in my opinion, a lot of the schools I go to now, a lot of the seminars I do, a lot of these younger kids have holes in their game because they weren't forced to take the time to do things. And it's about repetition, because you only get muscle memory through repetition, right? You can't just, I did it once the right way and now I move on. Because when you're in the ring, there's so many things happening that you can't think about these basic things. They just have to come naturally because you got all these other things that you need to worry about, right? So I really had a good base with Terry Fox and Eddie Sharkey learning the old school ropes of pro wrestling.
Okay. Sounds like you had pretty good trainers. And, I really like what you said about repetition, because I want to say it was a quote from Bruce Lee where he had said, "I don't fear the man who knows 1,000 kicks. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 1,000 times."
Absolutely. Yeah.
At that point, he knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what positions he needs to hit that at. You know exactly what to do in the ring. You've practiced everything you needed to do. You got yourself ready. Now, did you find anything difficult or maybe as a shock in the beginning of your training?
Not. Well, I can't springboard. I've never been able to springboard. Like I don't have really long arms, and I just couldn't get the transfer from here to here. Outside of that, I didn't naturally flip backwards as well as I did forwards. So, the first time I tried a shooting star press, I realized that pretty quickly that it's not going to be my thing. But the cool thing about wrestling is it's a blank canvas, so we don't have to do anything. So I always try to go, what do I do the best? What can I do and master, and let me stick with those things. You don't need to have 50 colors to paint a good picture. If you can paint a good picture with 5 colors really well, that's the key. And so for me, the in-ring stuff was the easiest. The most difficult part of navigating pro wrestling is the business. It's how people are treated. It's just the culture in general. And that's entertainment as a whole, right? Unfortunately, there's a dark kind of underbelly to the entertainment industry, and wrestling is no different.
Totally agree. That's just how entertainment works. And last thing I'll ask before throwing it back to Scully. So is there anything that you felt really was a big influence on you from your trainers that you thought, I'm going to carry this for the rest of my life, or anything like that?
Yeah, and maybe to a detriment. And it was, we protect our opponent, we protect the business, we protect ourselves. That middle one, protecting the business, protecting the magic of what we do. That was still very much alive when I started training. It wasn't that people thought wrestling was real. It was that as a magician, I'm not going to tell them how I do my tricks. I'm not going to tell them I'm not really pulling the rabbit out of the hat. Even if they know I'm not, it's okay. I'm not trying to insult their intelligence, but the magic of pro wrestling is blurring the lines to where they don't know how the tricks are done. And that's been lost. That's gone. It's never coming back. I was probably one of the last holdouts of kayfabe to, protect the business, so to speak, protect the magic. It's not about lying to people. It's about saying, hey, it's a magic trick. I'm a magician. I don't care how bad you want to know how I do the trick, or I don't care how bad you want me to tell you, yeah, it's not real. That is what pro wrestling is. Yeah,
totally feel that. Okay, I have one more then before throwing it over to Scully. I apologize, man. I don't want to take the spotlight from you. But the last thing I want to ask you then, so how do you feel about WWE's show they have on Netflix where they're basically just pulling back the curtain and saying, like, yeah, this is how it works?
I haven't seen the show, so I can't comment too much. But as I just said, at this point, it's out, right? The toothpaste is out of the tube. It can't be put back in. So, again, I don't know if I was that 5-year-old today and I would see what pro wrestling is and how it's presented now if I would have fell in love with it. It's not for me. I also understand that culture's changed. I understand that media's changed. How people consume entertainment's changed. So I think every generation says, well, back in my day, It was so right. Music was better back in my day. Movies were better. Wrestling was better back in my day. That's every generation says that. But yeah, it's. I jokingly kind of refer to it now as like you had the Attitude Era, and now we're in the era of cosplay pro wrestling, where it's just like people dressed up playing the part, but none of it feels authentic and real anymore.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that, but I'm not going to hog the spotlight. Scully, go for it, man. I don't want to keep taking time from you.
Nah, that's all right. I was happily listening to it, but yeah, I agree with this wholeheartedly. Like, the current product is so hard to be emotionally invested in it. Like, I was the same as a young lad. I think I was about 5 years old when I started watching wrestling. I'm 40 this year. So I've been watching it a long time, and it's very hard for me to watch a whole show now. Like, sometimes I just watch the highlights because it's just not the same, is it? So I agree with what you're saying there. So can you tell us about what it was like in the Indies before you got your first break in ROH?
Well, it was a lot different than today because, we didn't have social media to market ourselves, right? So, to get our name out there, we literally had to hop in the car and drive places and wrestle new areas to meet new people and be seen by new eyes. We couldn't put our match up on YouTube and then just tell everyone to go watch it. So it was a little slower progressing. It took about 4 years of networking and slowly branching out of Minneapolis to Chicago and then Milwaukee, and then how far are you willing to drive, right? And then eventually driving 8, 10, 12 hours down to IWA Mid-South, and then we drove 16 hours to go do a Dr. Tom Pritchard camp. And then that opened some doors to do some dark matches and some extra work with WWE in 2004. Around that same time, I got to do the Super 8 tournament. So I was starting to be on the radar of the kind of more national scene as opposed to just the local scene. And then I went and did a tryout match for Ring of Honor. And, I remember my buddy sent me a press release about this Ring of Honor thing. And I kind of had the same approach I did for my first match. I'm like, I'm not ready yet. I need a little more time, But I went and had that tryout match in 2004. And they were interested in using me. So I packed up my car and I moved out to Philadelphia. I've curated a life with no wife and no kids and no pets and no plants, to where I've been able to pick up and move whenever I've needed to go where the opportunity is. And I think that, that's an advantage I've had over some other people who have those things. That doesn't make it as easy to just pick up and go. So anytime opportunities present themselves, I made myself available.
Interesting.
Yeah, and your Ring of Honor career, I thought this earlier, it really did escalate really quickly, because how quick from where you debuted to where you're beating Samoa Joe.
Yeah.
It was pretty quick, wasn't it? And Samoa Joe had the title for how many days or years it was? I can't.
2 years or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So from you debuting in ROH, that escalated very quickly.
It did. Yeah. And I still didn't really know what the hell I was doing. I was faking it until I made it, so to speak. If you look back, we were all relatively green and inexperienced. We just, they cultivated this group of guys that were plucked from all over, and they were all super competitive and highly skilled, and we all pushed each other to get better. If you get in the ring with Samoa Joe, you have to step up or you get stepped down. Low key, Bryan Danielson. It's so it was different from where I had been wrestling more local, where I'd kind of become the best guy in the area, but I was still really green. Now I'm wrestling guys that are better than me and have been doing it longer, and now it's making me step up. And yeah, man, it happened quick. I'm not even sure if it was 6 months from when I had my debut to when I took the title off of Joe. And funny story, I found out after a couple years later. I was working for a sister promotion for Ring of Honor called FIP down in Florida. And so I was down here for that show, and Gabe Sapolsky, who was the booker, was down here for those shows. And me and Gabe have never really talked in depth. We talked a little bit, but never really sat and really had a long conversation. Well, we got stuck in the airport because of a hurricane. So all the flights were canceled, and we ended up stuck in the airport for like 6 hours and just sat and talked wrestling. And he got to know me and vice versa. And he told me after, he said, that was the thing that made him decide to have me be the guy. Because originally I wasn't supposed to be the guy. There was somebody else that was earmarked to beat Samoa Joe. And after that conversation and that 6 hours stuck in that airport, he decided to go a different direction and give me that opportunity. And that was really the thing that then put me on the map, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I was also watching your matches as well. And my God, don't you move? Like, you're quite a quick guy, aren't you? Like,
not the biggest guy. You got to be quick.
No, exactly. But I agree with you as well, because I'm a short guy. I'm 5'3", which is a midget. I literally.
Can you still say that word?
Hopefully.
You're in the UK, man. They can come right to your door and they can,
Yeah. Well,
You're not wrong.
I'm allowed to call it myself, I guess. But
well, that's the one feelings we don't care about. We can't make anyone feel bad. You can't fat shame. Can't say the R word because you might hurt someone's feelings. But short guys, especially short white guys, f them. We don't. Oh, sorry about the language. Don't know if you can say that.
It's okay. We'll blur it out. No problem.
That's the one feelings we don't care about. If you're short, we can still dunk on you, right?
Well, I get it every day at my work where I work. My guy next to me calls me a dwarf. He calls me a hobbit. I don't know, but I find it funny. I have even made a rap song about it. So
that's awesome. Yeah, a lot of wrestling fans think that somehow, like, cutting on my height gets to me or something. And it's like, I stopped growing a long time ago. So like, I'm pretty comfortable right now with where I'm at in life. And so that's never bothered me at all.
No. And as they say, big things come in small packages, right?
Yeah. Well, and also, like, if that's the only thing that you can criticize me on, right? Like and I always say, like, well, man, just think how great I must be that I'm able to accomplish everything I did at 5'8",
Yeah.
So I remember telling Braun Strowman once, I said, just remember, buddy, if you were my size, you wouldn't have made two nickels to rub together in this industry.
That's true.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your submission move, your finishing one. When you did it, does it not hurt your neck? It looks like it really hurts your neck.
No, I'm just bridging.
Oh, okay.
It's just a bridge. And so I call it the last chancery because the front chancery is just like a front face lock. And then with that bridged over, it was kind of like my answer to like Bryan Danielson's cat of mutilation. I was like, well, maybe I can do something similar to what he did because we had some back and forth matches and some feuds. And it just stuck. And so, as I'm getting a little up there in age, I got to stay limber so I can keep doing that bridge. Otherwise I won't have a finishing hold anymore.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I take it that you used your amateur wrestling experience to create that.
A little bit. I didn't have an extensive amateur career. It was very brief because baseball kind of ended up taking a hold. But that just understanding body mechanics, I think, from sports in general was something that definitely helped me in wrestling. And, but really once I started training, like, I probably spent more time once I started training pro wrestling doing amateur stuff than I actually did amateur stuff when I was amateur wrestling, weirdly. Yeah.
I see. Okay. So it makes sense that you utilized any kind of athletic experience to be able to work into that. So something else that I do want to ask you about, moving on from Ring of Honor, you ended up in TNA, and wasn't your debut against Christopher Daniels?
I believe it was, yes. You have a good memory.
I'm not even going to lie. I watched it a little bit earlier today,
Nice. Yeah.
getting in the mindset and remembering how you worked and everything. Now, I really enjoyed the match, and I do want to ask you, what was the process like going from Ring of Honor to TNA? Were you approached by anybody, or were you able to just kind of... I'm not really sure exactly how that works, but I know Eric Young talked a little bit about he got offered a contract. He didn't even read it because he was in the dark when he signed it, but I'm sure you probably didn't do the same.
Yeah. So at the time, someone contacted me. Maybe it was Jeremy Borash, but they basically said that they'd done an internet poll for the X division, and that I won by a landslide. That people wanted to see me in the X division, and at the time, the deal I was under with Ring of Honor didn't prevent me from doing anything. So when I first went to TNA, I was just under a per appearance deal. I wasn't under an actual contract. And this leads into, my first suspension with TNA was them telling me to no show a Ring of Honor event, to fly down early for their pay-per-view. And, the problem with that is Ring of Honor was my full-time job. I was running the school. It was paying all my bills. And TNA at the time was a lot of promise, and hope. But, financially, I wasn't under any kind of deal that was paying me anything substantial. And so when my part-time job called my full-time job and told them I wasn't coming to their show because their show was more important, I took exception to that. And it's also not how I do business. So I stayed behind. I went and did the Ring of Honor show, and then drove through a snowstorm and sat through cancellations and whatnot, and still made it down on Sunday for the pay-per-view, about 3 hours before I had to wrestle. So I felt really good about my decision that I didn't screw anybody over. But then the next day I was told I was being suspended 60 days for being late to the pay-per-view. And so that's kind of, again, when I talk about the difficulties of the industry, it was never anything in the ring. It was always navigating this mindset of how you treat people, and me getting punished for not no-showing another event. Right. And so then I left. I was suspended, and that's when I came back. Then they did offer me a proper contract, and I came back as Austin Starr. Because I didn't want to give them ownership of my name, which they wanted to own. So I came back as Austin Starr, and then I think like 6 months later I got suspended again for a bad attitude for asking to be compensated on a day that I wasn't being paid, but they wanted me to come into work while I was paying all my own expenses, and they saw that as a bad attitude. So.
Oh man, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry to hear that.
This is the reality of not just the wrestling business, but a lot of entertainment businesses, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I'm glad to see that you don't really seem to hold it against them or anything. It's just, it's in the past at this point, No.
Holding on to negativity in these things only hurts yourself, right? I'm very much at peace with everything that's happened in my life and my career and where I'm at now. So yeah. Well, but facts are facts, and the truth's the truth at the end of the day, right? And to be fair, like the people that are running the company now are not the people that were running the company then. I was there under many different regimes, and hopefully a lot of the things that plagued them back then, as far as doing business, are things that have been improved now. Yeah,
hopefully. And one thing that I have been wondering, and I've not been able to ask anybody about this, but I do want to ask you, because even that first match of yours, that debut had it. What was it like adjusting to a 6-sided ring versus the 4-sided ring? What did you think of that?
I'm a bit of a traditionalist, so I wasn't really a fan. The ring was stiffer. It wasn't as forgiving, not only the mat, but also the ropes, because there's a shorter distance between turnbuckles. So the ropes were very tight. And then just some basic spots, your positioning is different. You go to hit the ropes and it's a turnbuckle. So now you're going at a different angle. And then standing on the top rope, as someone who does stuff off the top rope, most ring, it's a 90-degree angle in a 4-sided ring. You get to a 6-sided ring. Now that 90 degrees becomes 120 degrees. So now your legs are further spread apart. And when you got short, little stubby legs like I do, you spread my legs apart, and now it's a little more difficult to jump the way that I was used to jumping. So I I understood why they had it. I understood it was about their identity to make them stand out and be different. The fans liked it, but from a practical standpoint of actually performing inside of it, I wasn't a huge fan. No.
Okay. Well, hey, fair enough. Everybody's got their preferences, and I will say it was part of the identity, but if at the end of the day it wasn't really helping anything, it's probably better that they've done away with it, And especially when most people train coming up in a 4-sided, and then all of a sudden you get to this promotion and it's like, hey, yeah, we do a 6-side. Like, okay, I'm going to have to relearn this for I don't know how long.
And honestly, like the relearning part isn't the biggest factor. To me, the ring was less forgiving on the body. And, the problem is a lot of times is the people making those decisions aren't the ones that have to go in there and then deal with that on their body, right? So it's easy for them to write it on a piece of paper without actually having to then go and do it. And so I think from a long-term standpoint, that, the health of the performer should be paramount.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And once again, I don't want to hog the spotlight. Scully, go ahead and take over, man. I'm sorry for going on the tangent like that.
Nah, that's fine. I was thinking the same when you was just before you asked about it. Actually, I was thinking about the ring and I was going to ask about it, but you beat me to it. But it was obviously their own thing, so they could stand out from the crowd, I guess. But the thing for me that made TNA was the X division, and of course, you, Austin, were maybe the king of the. I'm King Scully, and you were the king of the X division, I would say. What did you make of the X division when you was in it?
The X division is interesting because it's really the thing that for a lot of people was the identity of TNA, but I never understood exactly what it was. Meaning like what's the parameters of what makes an X division wrestler or X division style? At some points, it was mostly guys that were considered cruiserweights, smaller, more athletic guys. But then you had guys like Samoa Joe competing in there. Or then they would decide a guy like AJ Styles is too big of a star to be in the X division, so now he's competing for the world title. Well, then does that mean the X division is a secondary title and it's lesser then? So from a performer standpoint, these are my questions. It was like, what is the X division? And then how are you positioning it in relation to the other championships in your company? And a lot of times it was positioned here. And so again, option C was about trading in the X division title for a shot at the world title. Well, what if I thought the X division title was more important than the world title? Well, it wasn't, not because that's not what they featured as the top championship. So, but at the end of the day, I mean, the style that we now see in wrestling, for the most part, across the board, was what the X division was, which was what Ring of Honor was. Like, it is that style. And now it's become basically what pro wrestling is. So really, the X division was, in some ways, laid the groundwork and the precursor to the style of pro wrestling that we have now across the board.
Okay, yeah. Who are some of the guys you enjoyed working with the most in that division?
In the X division specifically, me and Brian Kendrick always had good chemistry and had some fun stuff with him. I didn't get to wrestle AJ a lot, but that was always was a great matchup because, again, it was like kind of a measuring stick, so to speak. Samoa Joe, I've always had great chemistry with Samoa Joe. We've had a couple of bangers for the X division. And then outside the X division, Bobby Roode, and Bobby Roode is one of my favorite guys to work with, either against or teaming with him. Yeah.
I believe my best mate's favorite theme song is Bobby Roode's WWE one.
So it was a good one, man.
Yeah, glorious one.
There was that. Unfortunately, they didn't do more with that. I think, and I know Bobby's settled into a good role behind the scenes, but I felt like he really could have been a top guy if they put a little steam behind him. He had everything they looked for there.
Yeah, he definitely did. What about tag team wrestling? Because you were a tag team, you were part of a faction. Did you enjoy being in that sort of stable and as a tag team wrestler?
Yeah, I like tag wrestling. Again, I grew up watching a lot of tag wrestling. You know, if you think about especially the Crockett era of the NWA, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, the Road Warriors, the Russians, you know, the Fantastics. I mean, there's, you know, so tag wrestling was always presented as, you know, you had your tag champs were presented as the same importance as the world champ a lot of times. And so I grew up watching a lot of great tag wrestling. So yeah, I really enjoy tag wrestling. It's a different psychology. You know, the match is completely different. And now it's about like, you know, the combination of 4 guys, you know, and so that just adds another layer, another element to things.
Okay. I like that. With regards to your promos, because you were really good at promos, very good heel work. I really enjoyed them. When I was watching you, I would be glued to it, to be honest with you. With regards to your promos, who inspired you to work in that kind of way? Or was it just your own style?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was my own style influenced maybe even subconsciously from guys that I grew up watching, whether it was Arn Anderson, you know, or Ric Flair, you know, like, again, I always say if you really break down me as a pro wrestler, you'd probably see a little bit of all the Horsemen in there, a little bit of Tully, a little bit of Arn, a little bit of Rick, you know, and so because like again, Arn Anderson like was believable, like he's a wrestler's wrestler, like he's the litmus test of like pro wrestler, right? Like no nonsense, straightforward, like to me like the pro wrestling I liked, which was presented as real and authentic. And no nonsense. And then you have Ric Flair, who was those things, but over the top and flamboyant, but credible, right? Like, and there's a art to being flamboyant and yet still being credible. But you know, I think at the end of the day, that when it comes to promo work, it's first of all understanding like who your character is, but then like the more you can pull from like authenticity, the better you are. You know, and like as far as like being a heel, you know, for me it was the opportunity to take all the things that I see around me in life, and I get to embody all the bad stuff that I see that in real life bothers me, and then I get to embody that, and I get to be that, knowing that in the end I'm going to get what I deserve, because unfortunately in real life the bad guys win. A lot of times, right? Now, let's be honest. The bad guys win more often than not. In wrestling, I get to be the bad guy, and then I get to give the fans the satisfaction of getting what I deserve, which we don't always get in real life.
See,
I like that. What was it Scott Hall said about good guys don't last, but bad guys live forever? Is that right?
if I remember right, it was something along the lines of what's called hard work pays off, dreams do come true, bad times don't last, but the bad guys do.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
But all right, so you had mentioned about option C. Now, how much creative control did you get over that storyline? Were you at all involved with the writing of that, or was that just something that, was it TNA? Was it you? Where did that all come from?
I mean, I wasn't involved in the writing. They basically came and said, "Hey, this is what we're going to do with you," and you know and so I remember the promo with Hogan was option A or option B, and I just kind of threw out, "Well, hey, what about option C?" Like, and I have this idea of like, what if we do this? But like, I was like, 'cause if I just hand it over, like, well, what does that mean then? I was like, so what if like we make Destination X every year? At least for Destination X, and this was my concept, and they don't exactly do that anymore. But okay, every year at Destination X, now the X Division title becomes the spotlight, because whoever holds the title at Destination X gets to hand it in for a shot at the world title. So at least for that month every year, the focus and the focal point of storylines in the main storyline with the world champion is going to also be with the X Division. That was kind of what my idea and concept was like, okay, but how do we do something so like every year someone has the opportunity, or the X Division itself has the opportunity to be the main storyline for at least a month.
Okay.
As opposed to a secondary storyline, which a lot of times it was.
Well, I think that's really smart, honestly, because it brings the attention to what is almost being viewed as a mid-card title in a way, when it's like, hey, these guys are working just as hard, and there's stars that have been here that are definitely world championship caliber. There's no reason not to have the attention over here. Now, exactly, it's perfect for that. So something else I wanted to ask you about. So when it came to the storyline about you being revealed as Suicide under the mask.
Yeah.
And everything. Were you involved with that at all? And how did you feel about that whole storyline? Because it was a little crazy, I remember, over the years. And didn't it start from like the video game or something?
So a lot of people, even to this day, don't understand what happened. And this goes to the point of them not explaining on television, not writing good enough that people understood. So the storyline was that I was only Suicide that night. Mm-hmm. I went and beat up the real Suicide in the back, and I stole his costume so that I could win the title and invoke option C. A lot of people think I was Suicide. I was never Suicide. I was literally just Suicide that one episode that night, and they obviously didn't explain well enough that I jumped Suicide in the back. I beat him up. I stole his costume so that I now won the X Division title and got to invoke option C. That's my only tie to Suicide. That was the only night I ever was in that costume. But to this day, people include me as like the guys that played Suicide. And I'm like, that's not exactly it, but that's okay. Whatever you want to say, it's fine with me.
Right. Definitely hear that. I've heard that there's a lot of people who actually were under the mask, and it rotated between certain people at times. Was that true, or?
Yeah. I mean, there was probably a half dozen guys over the years that played it at certain parts. So, yeah. And yeah, it was a video game character that they brought to life, and then no one thought like, maybe calling a character Suicide isn't the best idea. Because my thing is like, well, if he finishes the match and he's still alive, isn't he a failed gimmick? It's like if you do a suicide dive and you don't die, well, then you didn't really hit the move right.
Yeah, that's very true. Man, it was different, and I'll give them that. Points for originality. However, in the words of one of my favorite comedians, Bo Burnham, original does not mean good necessarily. No.
Yeah, if nobody else ever thought of it before, maybe there's a reason.
Or maybe if nobody else thought it was a good idea at the minimum. Yeah. Someone else might have thought about it, but then said, nah, it's dumb.
Yeah.
But, all right, so last thing that I'll ask before passing it back to King Scully here. So when it came to the concept of the match Feast or Fired, how do you feel about the concept of it overall? Because I've always kind of thought like, okay, there's a chance that I could get fired. I might call in sick today. I don't know about this one, guys. Yeah. But obviously for storyline purposes, it does its job. But what did you think of it?
I don't even know I can't remember if I was actually ever part of it or not. Maybe once. I vaguely remember. Listen, it's entertainment at the end of the day. They're just trying to do things to create moments and intrigue and, get people to tune in. So, but if they were legitimately not telling guys if they were going to be fired and the person was legit finding out as you open a briefcase, that would be very cool. I'm not sure if that was the case or not, because like I said, I don't remember really being part of that too much, but it's wrestling's always looking for something to create, intrigue, right? And create mystery. And so that was just one of those devices.
Absolutely. It kind of felt like a little bit of ripoff of Money in the Bank, but it had its own charm to it, I will say, because now it's like, okay, there's a chance that you could get one of 3 titles out of it: tag team, X Division, or heavyweight title shot, And
listen, everything in wrestling has been just used and recycled over and over again, right? I mean, it's
exactly
except for the reverse battle royal. No one's tried to duplicate that.
That's very true. And yeah, I shouldn't really say ripoff, because everything is not necessarily ripoff, but everything is inspired by something. That's probably better wording.
We all borrow and share. It's just how it is.
Absolutely. So back to you, Scully. What do you got, man?
I was going to ask you about your style, as in what you wore to the ring. So like your entrances, and that sort of thing, really. I kind of feel like, I don't know if to say this out loud, but I kind of feel like Seth Rollins kind of copies your thing a little bit. Like, because you were the one who, I kind of feel like you were the one who wore, like, don't know what material it is, but like the coats,
like we just said, everything's borrowed in wrestling. Everything's, lifted from somewhere else. And let's remember, like, I was a guy that was helping Tyler Black in Ring of Honor find himself and become who eventually became Seth Rollins. So it doesn't bother me if some guys are taking some influence from here and there. My biggest thing was when I was a heel was, what can I do to make myself extremely dislikable, right? Like, nobody's going to like a guy who calls himself the greatest man that ever lived. Like that, you can't even say that with a straight face. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so that's the most ridiculous title you could give yourself, right? And I would chuckle sometimes when I would like do radio interviews. Like, so right now we're on the phone. We got the greatest man that ever lived. And I'm thinking, man, there's someone right now who doesn't know anything about wrestling, who just like listen to the morning show, or like, who the hell's this guy? The greatest man that ever lived? Like, so to me, it was the absurdity of it. Same with the fuzzy pink vest in Ring of Honor, the shitty mustache, right? Like, it's like, it's not quite Hitler mustache, but close enough, like you can't cheer for this guy. So it was all about, like, again, making myself dislikable. Again, at the time, like, nobody wore a cape this guy's wearing a cape to the ring. I was wearing a cape. Like, not like I'm trying to be a superhero, because like now everyone wants to be a superhero. I'm a pro wrestler who wore a cape, right? Because I could, it was all about like doing things that in my, like, for me, like I thought was just ridiculous. But I'm like, well, it's going to stand out. And then, it's going to rub people one of two ways.
Was your wardrobe, did it cost you a lot of money? Because some of it looked quite expensive.
Yeah, man. Some of that wasn't cheap. And like my original cape got lifted at a house show somewhere, and like that got stolen. That really sucked, because like I loved that cape. But yeah, when you're getting custom ring gear done, and that's one thing I think a lot of fans don't realize is, none of the companies pay for our ring gear, and it's not uncommon to drop, $300-$400 just for a pair of trunks, right? Just like little underwear, right? Much less before we start getting a long tights and a ring coat and all that. You can also be pushing $800, $1,000. Some people are probably even spending more than that, But again, you're invested in yourself and your character. If you want to make $1 million, you gotta look like $1 million, right?
Yeah, that is good. I'll pass you back to Maverick.
Okay. All right. No problem with that. So we are getting a little bit closer to the end of the show here. So there's a few questions I like to try to ask everybody that comes on here. Every guest that we've had, I try to ask them these few questions. And one of them is, if you could go back in time to like the day before you started training and going on this journey, what advice would you want to give yourself before you started?
Oh boy. It'd be a lot. Don't take any of this too seriously. And when I mean any of this, I mean life in general, including pro wrestling. And don't live in the pro wrestling bubble so much that it becomes everything you are. And this is something that I've seen, and luckily for me, I was able to work my way out of. But it's this double-edged sword, right? For most of us to become successful, we have to be consumed by this. We have to eat, breathe, sleep, and it has to be our everything, right? Every day, every waking moment, that's how you get to the top. But the danger with that is if you have nothing else to anchor you outside of pro wrestling, then your whole identity and your whole sense of self and self-worth is attached to this make-believe bubble that's not real, right? Who's the best and who's the worst is someone's opinion. It's not something that's quantifiable. And so for me, like, you know, Austin Aries pre-2020 and Daniel today are two different people. And I became consumed. It was everything. It was my identity. It was everything that I did. And when you don't have anything outside of that, the danger is when things turn, or you're no longer in the spotlight, or you're no longer in top, or again, the new flavor comes into town. Are you able to sit with that and still be okay as a human being? Right. And so that would be the advice I'd give myself. Would say, hey man, like, work hard, invest in this, but don't make it everything, and don't take any of this too seriously.
Okay. I think that's really solid advice. And, you know, RVD, when he was on, he had said, you know, it'd probably be after a really long conversation, you know, because there's so much that you learn.
So much, 25 and 26 years now, you know, like.
Yeah, exactly. You learn so much, and it's like, okay, you know, maybe there's some situations you regret, or maybe there's some things where you're just thinking, I wouldn't want to change a thing. But, you know, there's always something that you can tell yourself and be like, you know what, this would have probably improved a lot. But all right, I think that was a really good answer. So next thing that I like to try to ask everybody, who do you personally believe is the greatest of all time wrestling wise? And this can be anybody from history, does not matter.
Boy. You know, it's, how do you define greatest, right? Like, are we talking about the greatest in-ring wrestler? To me, in my lifetime, no one compares to Hulk Hogan. No, like, Hulk Hogan is responsible for what pro wrestling is today, in my opinion. He transcended the industry and moved it into pop culture, moved it globally. There's very few athletes or entertainers in general that if you put a silhouette of them up, you'd know exactly who they were. And you could show someone who doesn't even follow that sport and then go, oh, that's Hulk Hogan. Right? That iconic look with the handlebar and the red and the yellow became a brand that was larger than pro wrestling itself. And so, you know, we can debate, and if you're younger, you might go, oh, well, it was The Rock, or it was Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know, if you're a purist, you might say, oh, well, you know, Ric Flair in ring, or Shawn Michaels in ring. But to me, if the phenomenon of Hulkamania never happened, all those people wouldn't have been there to talk about it, to talk about any of them. So, I mean, that to me, nobody will be a bigger name in the history of pro wrestling than Hulk Hogan.
Okay. I could definitely see the point with that. And I have, you know, I'm never going to disagree with people when they say, you know, this is who I think. Because, hey, that's your opinion. There's plenty of people who have said anybody under the sun. And you know what? Hey, that's up to you at the end of the day. Now, next question that I always like to ask. So if you could book yourself to be against anybody throughout history, and you can have any stipulation in the match you want, you're back in your prime, they're back in their prime, who would you want to go up against?
Man. I mean, and Eddie Guerrero to me was a guy that I would have loved to face. But I might be selfish and say, what if it's a tag team of me and Eddie Guerrero versus Ric Flair and Roddy Piper, and Bobby Heenan's the manager?
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fun one.
Absolutely, I could definitely see that. I think that'd be a lot of fun, honestly. And you know, I think that would be really cool to see, especially because I believe Heenan was one of the greatest managers, alongside with, I will say, my personal opinion, Jimmy Hart. I think he's one of the greatest as well. That's just, you know, once again, it's all opinions. Wrestle Magic. But, all right, so we're getting down to one of my favorite parts of the show. Now, this is where we ask our guests, do you have any sort of recommendations for the audience? It can be anything, movies, TV shows, video games. It can be your favorite milkshake flavor or your favorite breed of cat. I really don't know any breeds of cats. I only know colors, come to think about it. But anything that you would really recommend for the audience. So, Austin, how would you, or what would you recommend?
I would recommend stop eating animals and drinking their secretions like milk. Milk's for babies. Yeah, I mean, I could probably. I mean, recommendations here. We could have done a whole podcast episode on that. Yeah, I'll be honest, man. I don't watch a lot of entertainment mediums. Get out and put your feet in the grass. Go literally hug a tree. Disconnect from your screen and from your device. Look into the power of breath work, of just understanding how to breathe correctly and how it can regulate your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. We have a society now that's constantly stressed, anxiety, depressed, and they're hopped up on a bunch of pills, SSRIs, and all these things that do damage for a lifetime. And there are so many natural healing modalities that are all at our fingertips if we just go and seek them out. They're never going to tell you about them because they can't patent it and they can't monetize it. So understanding the power of breath work and just taking a minute and breathing a full breath from your gut into your lungs, into your nose, and holding it for a second, and then exhaling. And doing that 5 times, and how that can reset your parasympathetic system. So you're not in your stress and your fight or flight mode. You can get back in your rest and digest in your peace mode, right? So nature heals, right? And so again, if you really want to deep dive into like who the man behind Austin Aries is, like these are the things that I'm passionate about. These are the things that I spend my time learning about. I'm actually in the process of editing my second book called Hungry to Change. And it's about understanding how to take ownership back and become a conscious consumer, first and foremost with food, and understanding the choices we have in front of us when it comes to what we eat and what we nourish our body with. And I'm going to launch a mentorship program to help people who want to get back control of their life, first and foremost with food. But understand that like you are more powerful than you know. And in this day and age where we have so much information at our fingertips, you don't have to go wait for an expert to give you permission. You can heal yourself. You can take back control of your life. And, nature heals. And so if you haven't taken your shoes and socks off and put your feet in the ground and done some grounding, or if you haven't actually hugged a tree, I'd recommend it.
Okay. I kind of like that. That's a little different than what we normally get, but I'm happy to hear.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear something that's just so down to earth about, hey, de-stress a little bit, do something, just go outside, take a breath, look away from the screens, because I think we're all a little zombified with it, I would say.
I'm old enough now, but I just turned 48, right? And so I know life before the internet and social media and phones, and I see what society's become since. And it's like I'm watching it in real time, how it's shifting this way. And people are, and hey, I'm not going to pretend like I don't get sucked in. I get sucked in, but people are literally, they're mesmerized by these things. They are hooked. They wake up, they roll over, they grab this, and they're staring at blue light first thing in the morning, right? And it's controlling them. And, and then I'm just watching like social media and what I believe is like this culture of narcissism, where everybody thinks they're the main character of the movie, and everyone's saying, look at me and look at me. And I say all this as an entertainer, right? Like I've lived in this world of entertainment, and, but at the end of the day, like my job is to distract you from your problems. My job is to distract you from the things in your life that you don't like. It's to distract you from your health problems. It's to distract you from your money problems, to distract you from your relationship problems. And that's what we're all hooked to. We're hooked to these. Everyone is coming at you with their form of dopamine. Everyone's trying to peddle their form of dopamine on you. And like as entertainers, our job is to distract you. And it's been fine. Don't get me wrong, right? But in this next phase of my life, I want to help people start to fix their problems and solve their problems, not just distract from their problems, right? Because when you turn the show off, when the wrestling event ends, right? When the movie's over, when you turn the video game off, nothing's changed except for you have less time now on this planet, right? And so I think that, becoming more consciously aware of these technologies and what they're doing to us, I think could be beneficial for all of humanity, to be quite frank.
Yeah, I can totally agree. As much as it does give positives, like us being able to reach each other across the globe, there's definitely a lot of negatives. I think we've all been, a little brain fried from it. So I totally agree. But all right. So Scully, recommendation, brother. What do you got for us?
So I'm going way off track here, but my recommendation is, if you could, to join me on Wednesday night in your own home or wherever you may be. I will be in the pub to watch my beloved Aston Villa in the final in Istanbul of the Europa League. Because for me, as I said, I'm 40 this year. The last time we won a major trophy, I was 10 years old. So it is a long time ago, and it's a big deal for us Aston Villa fans. So I would say, if you can, and if you have nothing better to do, then tune into that.
That's football, right?
Yep, football,
or
yeah.
Soccer, as we call it over here. Right?
Yeah. That's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. But all right. So not a bad recommendation, Scully. I'm sure that I'll try to watch at that point. I'm not really much of a UK football fan, but nothing wrong with it, really. So my recommendation for tonight, guys. So I had to give this a little bit of thought during the show, but I'm going to recommend the old TNA video game. It was a lot of fun. Even though we're talking about disconnecting from electronics, I do still feel a little bit of love for that old game. Just because, it wasn't the greatest thing on earth, but it was still fun at the time, and I enjoy retro stuff. That's just me, and that's something I grew up playing a little bit, as a teenager, and I thought, you know what, this is different than everything else that I see on the video game market. Graphics were pretty good, and I just really enjoyed it. So yeah, I would recommend that old TNA Impact game. But all right, so getting ready to close out. So Austin, do you have any last messages for the audience before we head off?
Man, no, I think I pretty much said everything. Nobody wants to hear me go off on some big rant about humanity and how we can all do better, right? So love yourself, love the people around you.
Okay, fair enough. Scully, any last messages before we log off?
Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the Wrestle Magic Pod.
All right, well, that's fair enough. But all right, so you guys know how I like to end the show. Do something nice for somebody out there. You never know who needs it. There's somebody out there who needs a little bit of help in some form. And it can be as easy as just talking to somebody, being like, hey, man, what's going on in your life? You doing all right? Do you need any help? It could be the simplest little thing, from doing that to, hey, you see a homeless guy on the side of the road? Hand him a buck. He'll appreciate it. You might not, ever get it back out of him, but why not? It's just something to help out somebody, because the world needs a little bit more. But with that, in the words of my old buddy, Memphis Mark, we're out.
Wrestle Magic.